Hey everybody, what up? All right, so in this video, let's go ahead and stop talking about the fact that we're in a tech recession, because I think we're in a depression. Because if you historically look at like what is a recession, right? They typically say it's like 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. If we look at the technology industry, I mean, we're going on 3 years now where it's just absolutely sucked. It's completely screwed up. And I've gone into why some of this is going on. I don't really want to touch on that. I more want to touch on the fact that like I definitely empathize with a lot of junior engineers that are out there that are trying to get into the industry, because it's bad, right? It's bad for senior engineers. It's bad for juniors if you have a degree or if you don't. It's bad. It's bad for everybody. So when I was getting rejected, trying to get into this industry a long time ago, I actually spent 3 years trying to get a job. I talked about it at length on this channel for many years, talking about that journey, that struggle. And anyway, I was finally able to persevere, but there was a period of time where I was definitely on the verge of giving up. Even though I had a business, I felt like I was a programmer. I was calling myself as a programmer, like an entrepreneurial programmer, to like random strangers I would meet, like, oh yeah, I work doing this, but I also have a business and I do programming. And so I was like kind of faking it till I make it kind of thing. And really it wasn't even really fake it till I make it. I actually thought that I was a programmer, that I was good at what I did, and that somebody would eventually give me an opportunity. And there was a period of time, like I said, after like 3 years of getting rejected left and right, that I was like, maybe this isn't going to work out. And I was very close to giving up at one point, because I got embarrassed in this job interview that I did for, I didn't realize, it was like a senior Java developer that they were looking for. And I ended up trying to go in there. They wanted me to create an Android app. And like, I actually did that, like through like 2 weeks, no experience with Java or Android or any of that. I like crushed it and created this app, and it was actually pretty good. I think even now I look back, it was like 15 years ago, and I'm like, probably longer than 15 actually, but it was a while ago, and I still look back at that and I'm like, damn, that's impressive that I was able to pull that off. And no brag at all. I mean, the app, wasn't that great, but the fact that like, you didn't have ChatGPT back in those days, and Stack Overflow wasn't really even taken off. There just wasn't a whole lot of documentation. You were having to pour through a lot to try to figure it out. But anyway, bottom line, I got embarrassed in that interview, and I remember like I was on the verge of quitting, and there's an old coworker, a boss of mine that I worked for in an unrelated field, and she was like, "You're not giving up," and all this, and because I was telling her on the phone, I'm like, "Yeah," because I ended up going to the interview during a work day. So it was like, took off half the day. She knew I was going to interview for this position. And typically you wouldn't tell your boss that. But anyway, I had a good relationship with her. And anyway, I remember calling her afterwards. I'm like, that didn't go well at all. And like, I think I need to give this up. And, she gave me this big pep talk of like, no, you've been working really hard at this. And, I'm not going to go into all the details of that. But like, it was, if I look back on my life, it was a pretty significant, period of my life, because I was on the verge of giving up. So all that said, I can understand from the junior perspective of going to school for computer science, spending all that money, all that research and all that time that you've had poured into this industry, just to be like basically told, you're not good enough, you're not going to get an opportunity, like just can't get hired. So like, what are you, right? You went to school for this, and now like, are you supposed to drive an Uber or a DoorDash or something? So the fact of the matter is like, this period of time is worse than what I was going through many years ago trying to get into the field. But I do think that ultimately this is temporary. The thing is, though, is I don't know, and nobody knows how long this particular period of time is going to last. But what seems painfully obvious to me is, the other day I was watching this video. It was a Bloomberg video, and it had Kathy Woods from ARK Investment on there, and she was talking about vibe coding and the fact that anybody can vibe code. She's like, yo, you can now code, and we're not going to need coders anymore. And coming from such an authority figure like her, like it seems like everything she invests in or whatever makes the news. She's clearly like an influential figure in the business world and investing, and especially technology. And she's saying something so incredibly stupid as to what she was saying, and like I just basically was like, well, that's ridiculous. And I find though, I can't get too upset about such stupid things because they're everywhere around us. But the bottom line is that I've been using ChatGPT since it came out. I use ChatGPT all the time. I use Claude Code. I use Cursor. I wrote my own Cursor alternative to use local LLMs, and really just seeing what type of effort would be involved in something like that, which I realize there's really not even a moat. Like if you're going to build a VS Code clone, you have no moat, which is what they all do, right? So even Amazon's new editor is a VS Code clone, and same with the Google one that just came out. But anyway, that said, I use all these tools, right? And I find that in some ways they make me incredibly proficient, especially when you're talking about spinning something off the ground, right? Or if it's a field that I don't know much about. For instance, like I have a GitHub project that I threw out there because I was like, well, I vibe coded this thing. I might as well throw it out there in case anybody else needs it, because nothing was out there. And that was the only reason why I did that. So I would never point to that code base and be like, oh yeah, I wrote that. There's probably a lot of juniors and a lot of people that vibe code that were like, oh yeah, I wrote that. Well, no, you really didn't. You vibe coded it, which is a totally different way of doing things in this world. But all that said, the program, it offered the ability to debug your Oculus Quest a little bit easier. So it was a symbol. I'm not going to go into it really, but it was a symbolization basically, or desymbolizing stack trace errors that I was getting. So I ended up not even really using it, but honestly, and I don't think anybody else will ever use it again. But the whole point is that I vibe coded that thing and I don't understand how it works. The whole thing was done in like a day, and it was a field that I didn't really know much about. So for the fact that I didn't know anything about that, that is what these tools are able to provide. They provide that even playing field for something that you may not be familiar with, and it gets you off the ground. Now, that's great for the prototypes and like, the early stage, like basically prototype stage, Once you start getting into any level of complexity, it starts to become very costly, and it gets very sloppy. And yes, I know that we now have these guardrails that we can put in place. So like spec-driven development is what they call that nowadays. But the thing is like, I don't think it still doesn't work perfectly, and in fact, it's far from perfect. So anyway, the bottom line is that Kathy Woods, myself, and anybody out there in the world doesn't really know what the future is going to hold. And also, vibe coding is most likely not going to be the future. It writes unmaintainable code, and that will end up surfacing. So what I think will eventually pull us out of this tech depression that we're in is we've seen certain things like this before. Like during the dot-com bubble, it was a period of two and a half years, and like 70% of all tech jobs got wiped out in the dot-com bubble. That also ushered in one of the biggest technological programming innovation periods that we've ever seen, and there was humongous growth. Just hit the mic. There was humongous growth during the decade that followed that, right? And we ended up getting into like social networking. We got into mobile development, and then that ushered in like cloud development. And people told me on this channel 2 years ago, like, oh, ChatGPT, we're not going to have jobs by this time, right? I said it then and I say it now, like, that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel like with these tools, they've definitely plateaued to a certain degree. They go off the rails all the time. They make shit up. They tell you that you're right all the time. And they seem to be plateauing. Their capabilities seem to be plateauing. Now, what we end up doing is we write a shitload of context around context explanations, via spec-driven development, or like just simply a ton of code wrapped around their hallucinations, and that's how we end up making them efficient and somewhat usable. Now, that's going to continue. So that's going to usher in a whole, it's already doing that, but we're going to continue to see a whole new world, almost like cloud computing, or even the web, for instance, like where we're going to be writing a lot of code, and it's agentic AI code wrappers around the hallucinating LLMs to do automation. So pretty much anybody's job that can be automated away, and in the sense of like, I would say like a lot of like bookkeeping, accounting, logistics, things like that, call centers, anybody that's basically taking information from the customer and plugging it in somewhere. Those types of jobs are definitely in trouble. And I don't really know what the long-term solution is going to be for that. But I've said all along, it's going to be the programmers that are going to be one of the last ones to go, because especially if you know how to code, you're going to be able to write a better mousetrap. So that's what it is all about. Like Google wasn't the first search engine. They built a better mousetrap. They had the better search engine for the time. They were able to capitalize on that. They're far from a search engine company these days, but that's how they got their start. I think, you know, the short-sightedness of employers cutting back on staff, that a lot of that is simply, you know, high interest rates, people tightening their wallet, their belts. Every company's doing it. A lot of it is following the herd mentality. So that's frequently what you see with a lot of tech companies. You know, they see their neighbors laying people off. They can go ahead and do it as well. Typically in the past, there's always been negative backlash when it came to layoffs. There still is. But when everybody's doing it, there's a whole lot less so. So that's a lot of what's going on as well. You also have a lot of hallucinating C-suite executives that think that they can tap into this AI market and basically wipe out all of their staff and replace them with AI chatbots. And all this is sort of what's going on. And then there's even more with outsourcing and political instability and all this. So there's a lot of, you know, cards stacked against us right now. But what's going to end up pulling us out is when people realize that this house of cards is a bunch of bullshit. That's what's going to pull us out. And you're going to find companies will start innovating again. If Amazon thinks that they can get rid of all their employers, there's going to be a new Amazon, and it's going to do things better. And that goes with pretty much any one of these fields. If chatbots really get that good at coding, then anybody's going to be able to eat your lunch when it comes to a business perspective. Now, there's also the, you know, I guess the argument you could make around cash flow and things like that, but people will be able to find cash once the market is better. And right now, the market is not good. So I do think, again, that these LLMs are a great tool. They're changing the industry and the way that we code. And in many ways, they change it for the worst. I think there's going to be a whole level of profession that is simply going to have to come in and clean up all the AI code slop. It's going to be like kind of like a nuclear waste zone where like you have to come in and really pour through all the illogical vibe coded solutions that are out there that are making money. That's going to spur a lot of demand down the road. You also have simply the fact that since we've been on such a hiring freeze and layoffs and all that stuff, there's a lot of people that are looking for work and they can't find it, but because they're competing with everybody, right? The juniors are competing with seniors right now, but eventually that will stabilize and companies will invest back in junior engineers. And if they don't, again, they're going to get their lunch eaten by the companies that do. Another thing I think that people should also keep in mind is let's remember the way that these employers acted, right? So when we go back to normal, even level employer-employee relationship, you probably always want to second guess when they're talking about, oh, we're a family and this and that. It's like, no, you're not. You're a number. And the bottom line is that if your number is called, then you're gone. And if you're not making profit for the company, you're gone. This isn't a family. This isn't a charity. Never was, and it never will be. So keep in mind that when it comes to LLMs leveling the playing field, I think that really will open the door for a lot of entrepreneurial people that know how to make products. So, for instance, throughout my entire career, I actually have built products. You know, built this YouTube channel, a streaming website. I have a new video game that's coming out here in a couple months, or next month, really. I do that professionally, so there's a lot of greenfield projects that I've gotten off the ground. I feel like I bring a wide array of knowledge, and that knowledge can be definitely dangerous when it comes to building products. So I know for a fact, and this isn't just like Dunning-Kruger, but like I could come in and I could manage a cloud stack and I could do the front end, the back end, the database stuff. It may not be perfect. I may not be an expert, but I can certainly run those types of things. And when you level the playing field, you're lowering your overall moat. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's going to be a whole lot of people that have really good experience that can basically replicate what you do very easily. And so there's a ton of business out there that really isn't safe from being outdone by competitors. And then you're going to have the few citadels like, Google and Meta and all that. They have cash flows to basically compete just simply because they have so much cash. The bottom line is that throughout the history of humanity, anytime we've had these technological innovations, we've always ushered in a new stage of innovation. And that innovation will spur the economy and jobs. And granted, there will be some industries that go away. You don't need people that light lamps. You don't really need shoe shiners for the most part. They still exist, but you definitely don't need people lighting lamps on the side of the road. But you have a whole lot of jobs that came in from the ability to put electricity in your home. The automobile, for instance, we don't have horse and carriages nearly as much as we used to, but there's a whole lot of industries that came out of that. What I think is with technology is we're not going to stay in one spot. Programming has never stayed in one spot. I think we're nowhere near AGI. These LLMs, they mimic human behavior. They do that through guessing the next right word or letter. Ultimately, that's what they're doing. There's no reward system for them learning. They're not unsupervised and learning on their own. They do sometimes demonstrate, I think, the impression that they have some sort of general intelligence, but I'm not entirely convinced of that. And it seems like if you look at somebody like Richard Sutton, who's the godfather, he won the Turing Award just last year for reward-based learning. So reinforcement learning, I think, is what it is. But basically, you get a reward for learning. And, he's of the impression, basically, and I'll just summarize this, that these LLMs are not AGI. They're not learning on their own. They're not interested in the world around them. They are simply imitating a human. And some people could say, well, maybe that's how children learn. They imitate their adults and things like that. He's of the opinion that that's not actually the case, that they're doing that through their own initiative to expand and grow in the world around them. I don't know when AGI is going to be here. And when we do get it, we have a whole lot more problems than just programmers not finding a job. So I still don't think like even governments would be allow a company to have it, right? You're going to have the strongest military come in and try to take it over. And then, if we ever get to a point where simply nobody has any work, like they do talk about the 3-day work week, and maybe we need to do that. And I'm sure we will have that eventually. But I think those people that are going to be working 5-6 days, they're going to be able to build products that are going to be probably out competing those companies that are offering 3-day work weeks. So the bottom line, I think, is hard work and perseverance is always going to pay off. And if you build the better mousetrap, you're going to have an advantage over somebody else. If you have the ability to code and you understand logic and you can program without LLMs, then you're going to have a major advantage over any programmer that is using LLMs. Prompt engineering, I think, is probably somewhat of a new field that will be what vibe coders are called. But actual programmers will be better than prompt engineers and will probably be better prompt engineers than the prompt engineers themselves. So all that said, I think we're just simply in a tech recession / depression. And once we're out of it, we're going to look back on this as a pretty ugly time, but we'll start booming again eventually.